Well, hey folks, welcome to another episode of Let's Be Blunt with Montel, where we have a meaningful conversation at the intersections of cannabis advocacy and transformation. Today's guest has authored 2 books, The Human Cost of Marijuana Prohibition and Humans of Cannabis in a Renaissance of Hope. She's a founder of Cruel Consequences, Portraits of Misguided Law, and is here to talk about her incredible advocacy, her personal story, and how her work is helping to reshape cannabis policy and awareness. Tamara Lyn Netzel, welcome and thank you so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel today.
Thank you so much, Montel. This is just meeting you like this is really kind of a dream of my own.
Oh my goodness! Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, let's back up and talk a little bit. Let's go back a little bit before you got into this remarkable advocacy work. I'd love to start with a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you grew up, and tell us a little bit about your personal journey.
Yeah, so I have multiple sclerosis. I'll just start out there. I was diagnosed in 2013, and I originally from Western Pennsylvania, but my husband was in the military for over 32 years, and we, spent however many, those years traveling around the country and moving to different places. So we've lived many different places. I'm a former middle school teacher. And I taught school for 16 years as an English and civics teacher before I was diagnosed. And then my diagnosis, I tried very hard to keep teaching, but eventually retired from teaching. Some of the things that happened to me because of MS, let's just say I don't regret them, but because they brought me to where I am today. And, I never even thought about cannabis until I was 47 years old. And that's even 4 years after I was diagnosed.
Well, let's back up a little bit before that diagnosis. I mean, there's a lot of people, when we talk about MS on this show, this one or my other one, Free Thinking, a lot of people out there are trying to figure out whether or not they themselves have some issues. What actually made you go to a doctor to seek a diagnosis of MS?
Oh, thank you for asking. So I do remember teaching, and I do remember there were odd symptoms that kind of, appeared. I suddenly couldn't, things like I couldn't see out of my right eye, just went blind in my right eye. And, just out of the blue there, and, other symptoms like numbness and not being able to walk straight in the hallways of the school. I remember holding onto the walls and really I do remember feeling like I wanted to hide that because it was embarrassing, as I was trying to find out my diagnosis. That took 3 years. So
Did you go to an eye doctor first? Did you go to a neurologist first? Where'd you go?
I did go to the emergency room first for my eye. I had no idea why I can't see.
You and I have a very similar kind of a journey because I was at the Naval Academy and went blind in my left eye. And I got misdiagnosed for 20 years because at the time that this happened, this is back in 1980, MS was a disease that was characterized as being a disease of women of Northern European descent. And therefore, they hadn't seen a lot of African-American men or African-American people in this country diagnosed with the disease. So they completely said that it could not be MS, though along the way and along the journey of trying to find out what was going on, several doctors would write in my medical records, well, it looks like it could be similar to MS, but it can't be because he doesn't fit the criteria, which was really ignorant at the time. And I was first looked at, they sent me to a place called the Wells Eye Clinic in Pennsylvania because they thought I had something going on with my optic nerve. And, I was diagnosed with all kinds of weird optic nerve things that no one could understand. But go ahead.
Exactly. It sounds very, very similar. Yeah, and it, like I said, it took 3 years, even after an episode of where I woke up one morning and the entire room was spinning,
Mhm.
and I had to crawl on the floor. Like I have 2 children; they're now in their 30s, and my husband and everybody had left suddenly for the day, like they had left for school and whatever, and I just happened to be the only one in the house, and it was a really scary moment because here I'm like the room is spinning, constantly spinning. I can't see. I'm on all fours and I'm calling my husband, and I'm like, take me to the emergency room. And even after that, it took about 2 years for them to diagnose.
And did you go on medication immediately, or did they wait, or what?
No, so they held off medication, which, was odd. As you said, the criteria is, really off. I think it's still really off. But the criteria to get a diagnosis, so they wouldn't put me on any medication until they got a diagnosis. And so I'm waiting for have medication. But once I finally got on medication, that medication made my liver fail.
Oh my goodness. Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah. And as you know, with MS, you typically are put on, I was on 15, 16 other medications to take care of other symptoms.
So,
At the
a lot of people listening right now don't understand that. Again, way back as we've gotten better and better and better, almost every year exponentially when it comes to MS. But back then, it was literally a dartboard. They just threw darts at the board to figure out what they could do to see if they could help you solve some of your issues. And you just nailed it exactly. They were going after symptoms rather than going after the illness. I know that with me, I ended up, I had a difficult time my first couple of months in graduating from the academy because, I'm seeing military doctors that have no idea what they were looking at. And Walter Reed, Bethesda, Johns Hopkins, and, they put me on a myriad of medications. And some of the medications back then, and a lot of our current MS medications are autoimmune or immune modifying medications that do damage the liver. Along with me taking my annual physical and having to have MRIs and blood work. I have to do extensive blood work because the medication that I'm on has been known to cause liver failure in lots of other people. So, and I'm blessed because I've not had any issues with my liver, even though I've been on this medication now for almost 23 years, which is really kind of crazy for people who've been on it as long as I have. Um, so you started having liver issues. Did your liver actually fail, or was it just really
so, and my liver enzymes were
good?
50 times the normal level.
Got it.
And, that's not liver failure in like I need a new liver failure.
Yes.
They you mentioned Walter Reed. Walter Reed was where I went for when I had the liver failure. And something that was interesting when I look back as part of my journey is they tested me. I had no idea what that was, but they tested me. I still have the paper. It says they tested me for cannabinoids.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, what's that word? At the time, but and from there, it really was a Walter Reed doctor. They couldn't say much, um, but he did his very best. And when I asked him what it said on that sheet, like, what is this? Cannabinoids. He's like, you might be a good candidate for cannabinoids.
Got it.
And, that kind of started I'm a very curious person, being a teacher, um, and, that started me on being very curious.
Good.
And
You started looking into it yourself.
yes,
This is 3 years or 4 years after you were diagnosed. But I'm sure when you realized cannabinoids came from cannabis, and you got a husband on active duty, and
yes.
were you living on a base at the time?
So we were in Alexandria, Virginia. He was working out of the Pentagon
And
at
so
the
you
time.
were off base living,
Correct.
but still being seen by military doctors who had the ability to test for that. That would have put your husband in some sort of jeopardy in himself, correct?
Correct. It was definitely a risk. But I think he saw it firsthand. And that's the thing about MS, as you know, it's very difficult, I think, for them to diagnose because it is so, you know, you would have to spend time with the person to really understand.
It's so individualized. I mean, MS is a disease that, I mean, we've got probably about 1.5 million people in America right now that have been diagnosed with MS, and maybe more, but almost all of us suffer in some way and live through it some way differently. We have this really kind of crazy bell curve, and, where you fall in that bell curve makes it more and more difficult for doctors to actually diagnose. But now your husband was still on active duty at the time. Did he just get off active duty, or has he been off for a while? What?
So he's now retired 7 years really from military, but he did contracting after that, and he's now been retired and almost 2 years. So
Okay. Gotcha. And then, so you again, this doctor said you could be a candidate for cannabinoids. This is a doctor who's saying this, what, 98?
no, so this all happened so I was diagnosed in 2013.
Okay.
That all happened. This was all like 2016, 2017.
Gotcha. It's so crazy that, at the time that the doctor would say to you, well, you look like you could be a good candidate for cannabinoids, when that same doctor probably already knew that the US government had filed a patent for itself back in 2002 for cannabinoids, and came to neurological disorder, ischemic events, and things like that. That patent has been on the books for, at that point in time, for you, what, almost 15 years. So to suggest that it might be something that might work, I mean, the doctor should have just said, I know this will work. However, it would be tough for a Walter Reed doctor to actually recommend it. So you had to seek outside doctors, did you not?
That's correct. Yeah, I did. And you were part of my inspiration at that time. I think a lot of cannabis consumers can kind of relate, or medical cannabis consumers can definitely relate to this. There was a time when it was illegal in my state, and but legal, in the next state, and and you're navigating this whole landscape. And Montel, you are one of the voices that I was listening to before I even talked to another human being about it. And
Well, thank
you
you.
me.
Well, I came out concerned for other MS survivors and other people who were, I mean, in my battle with cannabis started really back in almost 2002 publicly. I decided that, I would go ahead and just talk about it because I was able to find some relief. And, though it's not a cure in any way, shape, or form for MS, it does help us relieve some of the symptoms, depending, again, every one of us has different symptoms. And so for me, it was helping me with some of the neuropathy, some of the pain. It didn't have anything to do at all with my eye, but it had a lot to do with my trigeminal neuralgia, which was extreme neuropathic pain in my face. So I did find relief, and still do find relief even to today, using cannabinoids. But you, at some point in time, and I'm sure you had a conversation with her. First off, before you ever used it, did you have a conversation with your husband, who's this active duty member, strong military guy? I mean, what did he say?
Oh, it's interesting you should ask that. Yeah. So it was sort of like that, but he saw me, and he knew that we had gotten to a point where, we've got to try it, and, it's interesting because, I went out on my own, got my medicine, how you do. And, our youngest son was away at college. He's like a sophomore, junior at the time. And I remember him coming home and just kind of hinting, oh, that he smoked cannabis at college, or whatever. And I
You
remember
kind
my
of, you
husband.
kind of smelled it in the house, right? No, sorry.
So, but my husband like chewed him out. You can imagine that military, feel. But he chewed him out. And he was like, "Why aren't you helping your mom get her medicine? You can do
Uh,
that. You should help."
oh, yeah,
Because it was not safe. It's not that safe, and but
sure, sure.
you do what you have to do, and
And back then, it was hit or miss because you were buying from the black and gray market,
correct,
or in that market, you have no idea what you're getting.
correct.
However, some of the benefits did outweigh some of the hesitation, I would bet. Did you find relief immediately when you started using it? relief for what you were looking for relief for?
Yes, definitely. Some my symptoms mostly, and even today, are in my hands and my arms. A lot of pain, a lot of spasticity, a lot of my hands and my arms, my fingers are mostly numb and yet have a lot of pain too.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, so that's really what I target. I have also, similar to you, there's a trigeminal neuralgia. I had glossopharyngeal neuralgia, which is just another cranial nerve. Um, yeah, that is under your tongue and down, and goes down into your chest. Um,
Right.
so
What were you feeling? Were you feeling pain in that? Were you feeling just neuropathy in that? What were you feeling?
yeah, terrible pain, like it's just a stabbing, like, traveling pain, down the cranial nerve that is. And I know it's very similar to trigeminal neuralgia, which they nicknamed the suicide disease, right? So
Right.
it's
Yeah, because people don't understand it. It's like the trigeminal nerve is a nerve that is laid basically back in the deep part of your inner part of your ear, right beside your ear, and it's what controls all the nerves in your face, your nerves around your eye, nerves there that helps the movement of your face to make you smile. Um, and for me, for years, I always walked around. And people were always saying, "Oh, you got something wrong? There's something in your eye?" No, nothing wrong with that, because I was squinting so hard because my face hurt so bad. And literally, I mean, that's what actually caused me to literally consume as much as I was consuming in the early days, because I was just trying to lessen that pain in my face. And when you talk about it, people don't understand what that is. It's like, it's undescribable. I still cannot really put a finger on how to make people understand, fire in your face. But, if you think about fire in your face, that's exactly what that feels like. And I can understand what you're saying when you're talking about having the esophageal issue, the problems going down in your throat. I mean, that would have been unbearable. But did you find relief using cannabis? Were you eating it? Were you smoking it? What were you doing?
um, so yeah, I was. So I started just by ingesting it, through oil, and then
Mm-hmm.
then I try, then I come up with the regimen that I use today, which is really a little bit of everything. I use topicals, everything, just depending on what I need, and that's the beauty of cannabis. That what I love about cannabis is, and for myself, that I think it taught me to take like personal ownership of my own health, where I was not before.
Right.
I was
Right. And, there came a point, though, after you started this regimen for yourself, you started to realize how beneficial it was for you, and you wanted to be able to share this with others. But there's a moment in time where you have to really consider, when you go from being a personal advocate to a wider advocate, that means public. That means people will know. So, was it hard for you to turn that corner and say,
no. So what taken me kind of into the advocacy route is I wanted to. Well, first I wanted to change the law in my state. I found the relief that I was feeling, and I was, I felt betrayed, again, betrayed with the medicine, betrayed by, the medicine and the knowledge of medicine we have out there. Me being an educator, I did feel betrayed as an educator, because educators, we kind of pride ourselves on knowing things, right? And I did feel a sense of, first, the medical. Are you kidding me? There's been this thing out there that could help me, and nobody told me about it, but they demonized it and made me feel like it was, something I should never try or use. And then, and then I learned about people who have been using it for years and who have been criminalized. And just talking to people. So I wanted to do my part in trying to make it legal in my state of Virginia. So I wanted to find somebody. There were some mothers who had already gotten as far as getting the law to be reformed to have medical cannabis in our state for their children who have epilepsy. And I found that I wanted to talk to them, and I wanted to know if there was anything I could do. They said, we want to expand it. We want to expand it from there. Um, And I had found the organization NORML, National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, and you see I'm wearing their pin today. But I found people who were fighting for it in my state, and they said, we need you to testify. And I testified because there was nobody with MS. And the legislators needed to know it wasn't just about epilepsy. It wasn't just about, a certain, subset of people that could benefit from this. And from
Correct.
there, we got medical cannabis in Virginia. That happened that year.
Excellent.
So from there, the NBC Dateline had asked all of us to be on a special for cannabis, and part of my story is told there. At that time, testifying and in the General Assembly of my state, and and being able to get that medical cannabis. I continued from there, really feeling like I'm new to this. I'm coming into new to this, and what could I possibly contribute to any of the movement? Um, I learned that, when people would tell me their stories about whether they were criminalized, that it was, that's the only time you heard it directly from a person. You need to know somebody, or you need to be criminalized yourself to really understand what that was, what that's like to go through, and what happens to a person.
That's what led you to create Cruel Consequences, which is truly groundbreaking. For our listeners, why don't you explain what the project is and how it works?
Great. So that's the thing that bothered me, is that I would get into, I was, dabbling in advocacy and talking to some legislators, talking to different people about it. But what bothered me is anytime anybody ever talked about anybody being criminalized, they always used a fictional story. Nobody wants to use their own story if they're criminalized. Nobody, like, publicly at the time, at least, and they're, whatever the risks of that. So everybody used the typical fictional story. The guy on the street corner got arrested and la la la. You know how that goes.
Mm.
And it bothered me because I was like, well, wait a minute. There are real people in this. There are real human beings. There are real human beings that are getting criminalized. Why aren't we
It
learning?
had been for years. Yeah. Right.
Why aren't we learning about the real people and their real stories? And that kind of, and I have photography and some journalism in my background. And I was like, let me take a stab at this. Let me get just a couple stories together. And maybe we might be able to move the needle a little bit more in our state. And I took only 4 stories at the time, but when I put out the open call to get stories, my email blew up. And here I am, and I navigated through the different stories, ended up now, telling these stories. I put them in my first book, The Human Cost of Marijuana, Prohibition. And each of these stories are different. There are a lot of organizations out there who are talking about social justice for marijuana. But I think what we do that's different is we put a face to it, like a real human face.
Well, can you take a second and share a couple of stories from your project that really stuck with you?
Yes, absolutely. So I can say the very first person who signed up for our project, he when we told his story, it was such a risk that he actually ended up passing away before he really got to see his story get out there. And it's really groundbreaking, because I feel like he had this hope, and he gave us that chance by allowing us to tell his story. And that's Joe Francis. And he was caught at age 19. Okay. How his story went down is his friend borrowed a joint from him at age 19. He had about a couple ounces on him. But this friend's like always bumming a joint, and he's like, hey, sometimes you got to pay me for this, and he said, you're gonna have to, you keep bumming off of me. So he's like, gave him some money, and so that friend got caught. Well, that friend then told on him and said he was his dealer. And what could he say? Because he did ask for money.
Sure.
And he was in college at the time, and the lawyer, and he involved his family, and it was very, very, difficult at age 19. The lawyer even told him at the time, hey, this will fall off your record, no problem. Turns out it wrecked his entire life until he was age 43, which he passed away from colon cancer before we got the medical program in Virginia where he would have legally been able to consume.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
And so you go into detail and explain that entire story and his journey. And again, right now that's in the book Cruel Consequences. Which book is that in?
That is in The Human Cost of Marijuana Prohibition. And that's the one right here.
Okay. And why don't you give people some stats? Where can they get the book? And, if they want to, where can they get it at?
So both my books are available at cruelconsequences.org on our website. My newest one is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, BookBaby, and our website. So.
Okay. And if people want to reach out to you, how could they get to you?
So they can find any contact information on our website, cruelconsequences.org. I'm also on social media, on Instagram, Facebook. You can look us up, Cruel Consequences. So,
and one more time, give out the title of both books. Cruel Consequences was the first one, and what was the second one?
Humans of Cannabis. So both have human in the title. So the human cost of marijuana prohibition and humans of cannabis.
And how do you decide which stories to feature in your portrait series?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
I'm saying, how do you decide which stories to feature in the portrait series?
Okay, thank you. So with Cruel Consequences, the Cruel Consequences stories that I started, I really felt like the message had to be more than just the years they served in prison or their sentence, that tied their stories together. And then I learned, and as I'm, all along, learning myself about cannabis criminalization, I realized there's just one thing: doesn't matter what charge you get or what sentence you get for marijuana, all of them share after they serve any kind of sentence or after they pay the fines, everybody suffers some kind of collateral consequence. Denial of employment, denial of housing, child custody, and the list goes on. And these are things that stay with these people for life. And that is actually something that
the cruelest part of it all, right?
That's right. That is the cruelest part. Why should you have to pay for the rest of your life? I never saw that I never understood that. So that's what drives me to tell these stories. If I may tell another one.
Sure, please.
Okay. My dear friend, Dolores Halbin in Missouri. Dolores Halbin, at the time when I told her story, 63 years old. Grandmother in Missouri, cannabis nurse, is growing for her husband's diabetes, treating his diabetes by growing some plants on their farm in Missouri. Their farm is raided. 2 63-year-olds get hauled off to jail, put in orange jumpsuits, and the whole 9 yards. And here it is. They do not give her husband his regular diabetes medication while he's in jail, and he passes away in the process.
Wow. Wow.
So she is still an advocate in Missouri. She's a tough advocate, but that didn't have to happen. That didn't happen. And there are so many just like that. People who have had those cruel consequences. It's cruel consequences that you lose your spouse over this.
I mean, have you seen some of your advocacy work actually create, impact on cannabis laws and communities and create better awareness? What have you seen? Have you seen this making a difference?
Yes, absolutely. So the format, as it is a collection of portraits, and I do take the exhibit out and in public spaces, and one of the first places that I did was a legislator in Virginia invited me to her campaign, event, and actually had to the Commonwealth's attorney uh, come and see my portraits. So legislators have come see, and I have discussions with people. I think it sparks conversation to talk about somebody else who has been criminalized and the specifics and how we might help people like that.
I mean, for as long as you've been doing this, I mean, what challenges have you been facing raising awareness about outdated cannabis laws? I mean, you've been doing this for quite a long time. Have you seen something actually change?
Yeah, it's not always visible, and I do know that. That's kind of one of the things when you do something like this, you're not always going to see your impact. The impact I do know is what's very important to me is, and something I didn't realize was the people who I help them tell their own stories. They are empowered, and I've seen that with the people who have been criminalized. I'll say like Harry Kelso did 10 years in Virginia for distributing marijuana. And we told his story. We actually got invited on Capitol Hill. He spoke at a press conference, and he kind of let me know after we had told his story. He's like, you helped me. You helped me hold my head up. Like, I was ashamed of this. Like, I wanted to put blinders on and just walk through life and forget about it, right? And a lot of these people, I think it's empowered them to speak out and be proud of their journey.
It comes to a perfect question. I mean, how do you collaborate with other organizations and other advocacy groups and other individuals on this issue? Do you continue to work with others to see if you can continue to move this initiative forward?
Yeah, so we have offered our stories to many other projects and different initiatives. There's one particular one in Alabama. There's a gentleman who is trying to put a museum together, and he's got the funding, and he wants to use our portraits for that. We have our portraits are also in 15 different cannabis related stores and dispensaries across the U.S. And these are stores and places who have, they want to educate they want to educate their customers, and they want to show that they care about, the history of, the criminalization, and that we don't want to go back.
And I mean that's unbelievable because you are using a lot of just talk a little bit about how important you think education is going to play into changing public perceptions about cannabis laws.
Absolutely. So stigma is something is very something I pay attention a lot of attention to. And I feel like stigma is so pervasive that there are the laws for cannabis, but then there's also many things going on that are not right when it comes to the stigma. Um, I serve, and I also serve on a city advisory task force for my city. That is actually it's cannabis advisory task force appointed by the mayor, and I just feel like the service that we that I do in some of these different things are like might be, let's see, um, fighting for people's rights to, there was a gentleman as small as like, okay, the law here in Virginia is that you can't smoke in public. And this gentleman's like contacted me recently, and he's like, hey, these people, my neighbors want to sue me because they're saying that I can't smoke cannabis on my balcony here. And it's my condo, I own it, but they're renting out to somebody, and there's all these small little things. So, I helped him navigate that and go, look, you are allowed to do that. You can do that. They don't have any rights there. That let them try to sue you. The law is the law. And I think that because we've had because we've had the stigma and the propaganda for so many years, it's ingrained in people's their ways, the way they treat people, and the way that we navigate, even when we have legal this legal substance. You know,
Sure.
yeah.
I mean, where do you envision Cruel Consequences of your project being, let's say, in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, we're building on collecting more stories. We would like to, I'd just like to kind of call out. We're always looking for new stories, the unique stories that kind of that are compelling. That kind of, when you read them, it doesn't make sense. It's not the straight up, they got arrested and they did a bad thing and so they should get punished. You know, and I said, as I said before, it's more important. I see, it's important to say, okay, this guy did 20 years or this guy did 10 years or whatever, but that's there are a lot of people that stop there and say that.
And it's ridiculous when we talk about somebody who did 10 years there, 10 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, when right now we have 38 states where you'll do no years. And then within those same states, you have legislators who are trying to still arrest people for something that is legal in their own state.
Right. So we're reaching out to states. We're trying to collaborate with people in Kentucky and Alabama. There are some other states who are welcome. Anybody else contacting us who would like to do anything like this. But our portraits are beautiful when they're standing in alone, and they're attractive. And I think for that draws you in to know the story.
And that also is baffling in the sense that, because those same states, Kentucky, Georgia, or not Kentucky, Alabama, not Georgia, sorry, Kentucky, Alabama, you can go to a bodega or a gas station or a 7-Eleven and pick up hemp-based cannabinoid products without any hesitation.
Correct. Absolutely.
And what do you feel about what do you think about that?
There's a lot of feelings. So there's a lot of feelings I have about that. First of all, I would not consume anything like that because I don't feel it's safe. I know enough about my own body that I'm very sensitive. Like, there are things that have happened, things that I've consumed that I would not take that risk. I prefer having, a product that I know is safe. And that's why I grow my own. So that is my answer.
And which state do you live in right now?
I'm in Virginia.
So in Virginia, you do have a robust medical program.
Yes.
Where the state's got testing requirements and those things, or no?
Yes, for the medical dispensaries. We're still kind of a little behind the times here. We don't have a retail market, which means, it's legal in this state. It's legal for adult use. So it's legal for medical. Medical, you can go, if you have a medical registration with a doctor, you can visit a dispensary here. There's not that many. There should be more. The prices are high. And we have, because of our current governor, he's held back the retail market. So we have gotten as far as having it for legal. You can consume legal adult use, but there's nowhere to buy it unless you have a medical registration.
Gotcha. And if there are listeners out there that want to support Cruel Consequences and support the efforts that you're working at, what should they do?
So again, all that information is on our website, cruelconsequences.org.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I got to say, Tamara, I mean, I'm so impressed by what you're doing, and keep up the good work. Please tell your husband we said thank you for your service. And how are you doing with MS right now? You okay? You getting better, feeling better? What?
Yeah. So I'm very blessed to have gotten a treatment. Cannabis, like I said, made me brave to take ownership of my own health. But I went to Mexico to get a controversial stem cell transplant treatment. And since then, that was 2019. And since then, I have not, according to, I go to NIH for my MRIs. So I've gotten all the best care to know for sure, as far as I can tell. But I have not had any progression.
Seems plausible. That's great. That's great. Congratulations. And you're managing your symptoms with cannabis?
Absolutely. So yes, so HSCT doesn't, it doesn't cure. It's the closest thing to a cure. It doesn't cure it, but I have all my previous symptoms too. So that's what cannabis helps me with. Also with MS, I feel like the more I move, the more I can move. Cannabis helps me move.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's a good kind of a recommendation to all of us who suffer from any form of, illness like this. I mean, the more we move, the more you know, the better you will do.
Agreed.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show today, Tamara. I really do. Your work has changed lives, and you're inspiring so many more. So please keep up the hard work. If you ever want to come back and just chop it up a little bit with us again, we'd love to have you back. And I thank you for what you've been doing. And we need more people like you.
Thank you so much, Montel.
Absolutely. And for all of you who've been tuned in and listening, remember, you can go to cruelconsequences.com or org. .org and get some more information about what Tamara's been working on, and keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. We'll keep bringing you stories like this to help you understand that, give you information that you might need to navigate this space. All you have to do is click that subscribe button down there and send us some notes. Tell us what you think. We really love to hear from you. And again, I'm going to say, Tamara, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in to the next episode of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.